Hello, and it's time for the Raw review here on Wrestling with Regret. And boy, oh boy, lots to discuss with this show tonight, and a lot of it revolves around Retribution. They have, according to the storyline now, they have signed with WWE, meaning they can do whatever they want, whenever they want. How the hell is that different than anything we've been seeing for the last several weeks for this group at this point? What is the logic behind that? What is the reasoning when they have, on a weekly basis, established their mission is to destroy WWE? How does it even work? Hi, we're this ragtag bunch of former employees looking to destroy your company. Okay, here's a contract. Is Vince McMahon just tired of seeing a frustrated Adam Pearce every week on TV because he can't stop that dastardly Retribution? Fine, let's just eliminate that part. They're officially part of the company now, because that makes a lot of sense. And that's not even acknowledging the fact that they have Bane masks now. Oh yes, they have all these fancy masks covering their faces really poorly, except for one guy who's believed to be Shane Thorne is the rumor. Everyone else, you could obviously tell who's who. The first person who talks is Mia Yim. She and Mercedes Martinez have the least concealing masks you could possibly find. And as Mia is talking, she is constantly adjusting her mask. It's falling off of her face as she is trying to spout out these two-bit words about how Retribution's going to destroy WWE from within. Mercedes just stands there. She was probably the MVP of the group. She had the least involvement in the whole show, and so therefore, by doing the least amount of work, she was the least exposed. Good for her, and I guess also goes to possibly Shane Thorne, because at least his mask was pretty concealing. But no, Dominik Dijakovic now, he's got Ascension makeup on his Bane mask, and there's Dio Madden. And we'll get to their team names later, because, oh boy, that's something to talk about as well. They call the wrestlers whores for wanting to make money, but now they're under contract, also making money. Unless they have those weird contracts that don't involve money changing hands, then what is the what is the logic of Retribution? Are you, to quote Mauro Ranallo, are you kidding me? Oh, but don't worry, kids, because the Hurt Business is here to save the day. That's right, folks. That heavenly bastion of goodness you've been conditioned to boo for the last 3 or 4 months are here, and they're the only thing standing in the way of Retribution's path to WWE dominance. You love to see it. It makes so much sense. So Hurt Business get in the ring, Retribution powder, in come the rest of the ninjas, the lesser members of Retribution, and they all beat down the Hurt Business together. And no one comes to save them. I'm sorry, but Dominik Dijakovic just did this big speech about how WWE, their mission is to drive out all of the cancer and the sickness of WWE being the contracted wrestlers, which they also are now, just if you're keeping score. So they're beating up the Hurt Business. It's an assault on the entire ethos of WWE, and no one's coming out. And spoiler alert, we will see that later on, but that should have been the first thing they did. I mean, we've seen all these examples of the roster banding together to keep out Retribution. We saw it on SmackDown many weeks ago when the whole roster surrounding the ring. Where was that for this? It's just, oh my God. And there's still 3 more hours of this shit. The Street Profits make their way to the ring. Cool drone shot for their entrance, by the way. And they're going to be joining commentary for this next match. It's a triple threat tag team match to see who will face the Profits for the Raw tag titles at Clash of Champions. These teams are Andrade and Angel Garza, Seth Rollins and Murphy, and the new tag team of Dominic Mysterio and Humberto Carrillo. 2 of these 3 teams I thought broke up last week, but apparently not the case. Anyway, Dominic and Humberto are just a lot of fun to watch here. Dives aplenty with these guys. Murphy wants to tag in Seth, but the Messiah leaves him high and dry, walks away. Murphy eats a wing clipper from Angel Garza, and Garza and Andrade win, and they'll be facing the Street Profits for the tag titles again. Yay! So we get another Retribution promo, this time backstage, and Dijakovic says that, the Hurt Business have chosen to bend the knee for WWE out of greed and for money, while other wrestlers are out in the cold waiting for opportunities. Are they not aware there's only a finite number of opportunities in wrestling in general? It's there's only so many opportunities you can possibly have because there's so many people that are in the population right now. Anyway, they are challenging the Hurt Business to a match later tonight, and it becomes accepted, so they're hyping that up later tonight. So they're giving away the in-ring debut of Retribution with no build on television. I'm not saying it has to be pay-per-view. You can have their first match on television, but at least give us like a week to prepare for it. And I get, there's also a surprise element too. Like, okay, yeah, but also build. Like, there's nothing built for next week at all, as far as I can tell, except for Clash of Champions. So what's booked for Monday? Who really knows at this point? Would have been nice if they had the in-ring debut then. Okay, I gotta shift gears right now before I go crazy. The next segment is the Kevin Owens show with special guest Shane McMahon. This is kind of awkward. They actually addressed their history in the 2 years or so they were feuding, but Kevin says it's water under the bridge now, and Shane is there to promote the Braun Strowman-Dabba-Kato match for Raw Underground. So he hypes those two guys up, and then Shane brings out his guest. So there's a guest for a guest. Dabba-Kato comes to the ring, and he stares down KO, and Kevin says they have unfinished business. He slaps Dabba in the face, and then he brings out his second guest, Braun Strowman. So we have a stare down with Strowman and Kato in the ring, and as Shane McMahon is trying to keep the peace and keep them separate, suddenly Aleister Black pops up, and he yoinks Kevin down and gives him the ring post-itis, as the Good Brothers used to call it, and so driving his balls repeatedly into the turnbuckle post, and then he scampers off there. So I think the announcers handle it pretty well, because after like Aleister's there and he's standing over Kevin, it just pans over, and the announcer's taking it really well, what they just saw there. But I think the segment itself was okay. It was chaotic, but it covered a lot of ground. It helped promote Raw Underground. It touched on the history of Kevin Owens and Shane, kind of leaves the door open to more animosity here based on Shane kind of setting up KO there, and then of course continuing the feud with Kevin Owens and Aleister Black. In a way, this might be like one of the most cohesive parts of the entire show, and it kind of accomplished the most. Backstage, Drew McIntyre's interviewed. He says that when it comes to Keith Lee, he's sure that he and Keith will be laughing over all this over beers in the future, but tonight they're going to beat the hell out of each other. Elsewhere backstage, Retribution still causing chaos, beating up Humberto Carrillo and Titus O'Neil. And then we go to that next match, Keith Lee versus Drew McIntyre yet again. It's a rematch from last week, ending in a DQ finish. This one, the stipulation's the same. If Keith beats Drew, and if Randy Orton can't compete on Sunday, the pay-per-view, then Keith will take his place in the ambulance match for the championship. Another big boy bash, these two with some hard strikes and just throwing each other hither and yon. One spot here is when Drew hucks Lee onto the announce table and it doesn't break, which is ironic considering what does break the announce table later on. I'll get to that in a few minutes. Drew hits the Claymore onto Keith, but then in comes Randy Orton. We haven't seen him in 2 weeks. He hits Drew in the back a couple times with a steel chair, and then he jams the chair to Drew's injured jaw, punts Keith Lee, so the match ends in a disqualification yet again. Why do they keep doing this? Poor Keith Lee. He's had maybe one clean match his entire time on the main roster so far, and he's only had 2 opponents. That's really bad statistics if you're Keith Lee. After the break, though, Orton had with a great promo here. I will say there's a silver lining to that segment is that Orton's promo is fantastic. He says he's never walked away from a title match before in his life. He doesn't plan on doing it now. He walked over to the ambulance, and he briefly forgets how many claymores he was hit with last 2 weeks ago, which is pretty funny. He makes a swear, and they censor it. He says he finally understands when he was in that ambulance 2 weeks ago, finally understands what guys like Edge and Christian and Big Show and Ric Flair and Drew have all felt at his hands, and so he's finally realizing what he's capable of doing, and he says that he will throw Drew in the ambulance and claim his 14th championship. Again, great promo by Orton here. He's one of the best. Asuka's interviewed backstage, and she's asked who's the bigger threat to her championship, Mickie James or Zelina Vega. Before Asuka can really get her answer out, though, in comes Billie Kay to cut her off, and she's complaining about how Asuka's been giving away matches and opportunities left and right lately. So before she gets to her point, though, in comes Peyton Royce and says that she should be the one to get an opportunity against Asuka here. And they also reiterate that even though Billie and Peyton are broken up as a tag team, that doesn't mean they can't be friends. Again, I like that they're still friends here. And I guess it's one way, kind of a loophole to keep them together on screen, which kind of defeats the purpose of breaking them up. If you're going to make them just broken up, then keep them apart for a while. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, Asuka challenges Peyton to a match for later on. But our next matchup is Mickie James versus Zelina Vega. The winner will face Asuka for the Women's Championship at Clash of Champions. It's a pretty good little match here. Zelina kicks out with a big flying sit from Mickie James, hits the backstabber to win, so she'll be facing Asuka on the kickoff show. Backstage, the Hurt Business have taken out some of the lesser members of Retribution. Then we see a Bianca Belair vignette where she shows up some poor schmuck at the Performance Center with all her athletic abilities. And then we see a segment of R-Truth with a day at the beach. He's got little Jimmy hand in hand with his baby, the 24/7 title over his shoulder. Akira Tozawa and his ninja referee are hiding in the ocean, waiting for the right moment to strike. And then as Truth is there in the water, we see a shark fin out in the distance. I was hoping he would F5 the shark. We didn't get to see that. But basically, he drops the championship as he runs off. It washes into the ocean briefly. Truth comes back, and he's getting ready to snorkel his way into the ocean to reclaim the belt. But then it also washes back ashore, and you see the tattered karate gi along with it. And so Truth is reunited. Everything's happy again. And so I thought it was a pretty funny segment there. I think that, I thought the Shark was going to become the 24/7 champion for a minute. Maybe that's what he did. Maybe he just held the belt for a bit and then spat it back out. At the very least, the Atlantic Ocean should get an honorable championship reign here. Cedric Alexander takes on Apollo Crews up next. MVP has some strong words to the Hurt Business, saying that, they may be judge and jury, but the Hurt Business are the executioners. And then Cedric Alexander saying that this is not Apollo getting revenge on me, it's me getting revenge on Apollo for being used by him for months when he was pursuing this championship match that he didn't really ever earn. Apollo shows up with Ricochet and says he wants to punch Cedric in the mouth. He also brings up he's facing Lashley for the U.S. Championship at Clash of Champions. How do you earn that shot? I must have missed that. Anyway, the match goes on. It's pretty good here. My favorite spot here is Apollo doing a second rope frog crossbody, which I've never seen done before. Like a frog splash with a crossbody twist. That was kind of cool. Cedric hits a big dive on Apollo to the outside into the barricade. He locks eyes with Ricochet. He's in Apollo's corner. And as he makes his way back in the ring, he's rolled up and Apollo wins kind of in a fluky kind of manner. And then that doesn't last long though, because in come the rest of the Hurt Business to beat all of them up. So that sure was worth it. It's really hard for me to gauge how I'm supposed to feel about the Hurt Business right now when they're baby faces in hour 1, heels in hour 2, and they're going to be faces again in hour 3. What the fuck's going on? It's time for the Raw Underground segments. Like I've been doing before on Raw reviews, I'm just going to lump them all into one spiel here. The first match we see is Dolph Ziggler versus Arturo Ruas, which is actually pretty entertaining, very evenly matched, worked competition here. It ends when Ziggler grabs Arturo by the beard hair to break out of a leg lock, gets the rear naked choke to win the match. Then later on, we see Riddick Moss taking on Eric of the Viking Raiders, and it's a big contrast to what we saw in the previous Underground matchup, whereas Ziggler and Ruas was very, mat-based and very technical and stuff. This one was a slugfest, and it was very short. Ultimately, Riddick just KOs Eric with the one punch. I have to mention that after each of those first 2 matches, Shane has introduced this new interview lady out of nowhere, Brianna Brandy, he's literally pulling this woman in front of him so she can interview these massive guys in Strowman and Dabba-Kato. Like, what a heel. And who is this woman, by the way? It's just she's dropped in the middle of the... So Raw Underground is going to have all the other features of Raw and everything, but it's going to be in a dark, smoky room. That's the only difference. There's no ropes. It's a dark, smoky room. We're going to have ringside interviewers, and we're going to have commercial... Okay, anyway, the main event of Raw Underground, which is a separate show apparently, but it's on Raw, is Strowman versus Dabba-Kato. And this one is also kind of a slugfest. The most impressive thing to me that got the biggest pop out of me was Strowman doing a go-behind on the ground onto Kato, which is the most athletic thing I've ever seen him do. But ultimately, Strowman does knock down Kato with one punch, and he takes him down. The referee calls it, and so Strowman wins. So at least Strowman still looks good. I don't know if he's going to stay on Raw Underground for a while. He's going to be the new unbeaten giant of Raw Underground now that Dabba-Kato's lost. Will Dabba-Kato start transitioning more to wrestling in the ring, in the Thunderdome itself? Because now we've seen him there. He's crossed that plane, so now he technically qualifies, I would imagine. We've seen people cross back and forth the last several weeks, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Dabba-Kato, now that he's been kind of built up on Raw Underground, to see him do more stuff on Raw proper in the actual wrestling world of things. So time will tell, but I thought that on the whole, I did appreciate and enjoy for the most part Raw Underground of the segments that we saw tonight. Out to the ring comes Seth Rollins and his manila envelope. He says there's something not quite right about the Mysterio family, and he shows a picture that shows the huge height disparity between Dominic Mysterio and his father Rey. And so he brings out the Mysterio family to talk about this DNA test he has acquired the results of after he had somebody do some digging. Where he or his guy found the DNA to do this test, it's never really explained. Just go with it. So Seth reveals, according to the DNA test, that Rey is not Dominic's father, and it's 2005 all over again. They even acknowledge this. They both do, that this has happened before. And Rey goes, it didn't work back then. It's not going to work now. And then Seth kind of shifts gears. Oh, maybe it's the wrong Mysterio kid. Maybe it's not Dominic who's the illegitimate child. Maybe it's Aaliyah. And the evidence is she actually showed compassion to Buddy Murphy last week after the cage match and whatnot. That's not something Mysterio would do. And so Rey kind of he kind of throws Aaliyah under the bus though by saying, she's 19 years old, she's naive, doesn't know the way of the world, and so that pisses Aaliyah off. And then they leave, and Seth apologizes for driving a wedge between the Mysterio family. And then we see Aaliyah and Rey fighting backstage. And then the final segment of this throughout the night is Murphy approaching Aaliyah and kind of like being, compassionate to her and apologizing if he did anything to harm her. And that's where it ends. And it's like, where are they going with this? So like, who is there an illegitimate child thing? Is that going to be real? Because technically, like, if you look back at 05, it's confirmed that Eddie actually is the biological father of Dominic Mysterio. And it's just like Rey is the adopted father, but he won custody of the ladder match. So that we're not really talking about that though. So like, is Aaliyah also, is she actually illegitimate? And like, who's the father? Is that going to be addressed? Or is that just something that Seth kind of dropped a bomb there to kind of blow up the family and everything? My thought was, are they going to make Murphy the father? Because like, that would mean if Murphy's the father, because he's 33 years old, he's 2 years younger than I am. If Murphy was the father, that means he would have knocked up Mama Mysterio at age 11 at the youngest, 12 at the oldest. I just don't see that being the case. But you know what? Weirder shit's happened, guys. Up next, Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler take on Natalya and Lana in non-title action. The Riot Squad have joined the announce team for this match. They are the ones facing the champs at Clash of Champions. The two put over the fact that they're stronger than they've ever been before, and they have much better chemistry than the champions do. As the moment they're wrapping that thought up, Shayna has made Lana tap out with the Kirifuda clutch. Then afterward, the champions jump with the challengers for a minute. They kind of have a scuffle, but they break away, and there's a stare down. Suddenly, Nia and Shayna just beat up Natalya and Lana some more. And poor Lana, second week in a row, she's hit with a Samoan drop through the announce table, and it breaks. So to review, 340-pound Keith Lee being picked up and dropped from a height from Drew McIntyre did not break the announce table. Nia Jax Samoan dropping Lana through the table makes it shatter. She is paying for the sins of Miro 2 weeks in a row. But yeah, I'm just wondering what the dynamic actually is officially with like Shayna and Nia now. They've kind of established they don't like each other, but they're kind of like working together. I'd like to see some more promo work where they explore some more of that. I love character work, especially when it's kind of odd couples and stuff, and not necessarily wacky odd couples either. It can be kind of like they're on the same kind of heel face spectrum. They can be both tough and also just don't like each other. Again, kind of like The Bar, Sheamus and Cesaro. It's like it's not the same thing at all, but I feel that like in terms of like where they are and who they are and everything. But I think that you could have that kind of dynamic of like two heels who are neither of them are comedy acts, and they don't like each other, but they eventually kind of form that bond. We are kind of getting more of that with Nia and Shayna now. I wish they had some promos to further expand on that. Asuka takes on Peyton Royce in non-title action, and again, exposing that loophole of not officially wrestling in a tag team capacity. You have Billie Kay in Peyton's corner here. It's a pretty short match, not too long before Zelina Vega runs in and causes the DQ finish, but she escapes before Lana can really get her and take her down once again. So, I mean, it's nice of them to cram as much build for Zelina as they can in 2 weeks. Zelina comes on last week and says she wants a shot at the championship. This week she wins that opportunity and she gets a jump on Asuka here in this matchup. It's in a small amount of time, I think it's the best they could have done. In your main event, it's a six-man tag team match as the Hurt Business. That's Shelton Benjamin, Bobby Lashley, and Cedric Alexander take on Retribution in their in-ring debut, and their names are T-Bar, Mace, and Slapjack. Those are some names. Definitely, those are definitely some names. It's very Aces and Eights kind of vibe I'm getting with this, more so now than ever before, especially they have names. It's like, not everybody who watches Raw also watches NXT. I'm aware of that. But anyone who does, it's so obvious who like most of these people in Retribution are, except for Slapjack is the one with the full mask. But like again, the ladies, Mercedes and Mia, they aren't even trying to conceal those ladies. And Dijakovic and Dio Madden are barely one step above them. So it's so obvious like to see that. And these names are just so like out of left field for me. Although I will say Jerry Lawler, who by the way is on commentary tonight, I have not brought up that once on this review, but Jerry Lawler's on commentary, and he famously like over the years, I don't know if he still does this, but he rarely like at the time, back in the day, would look at his notes. He would just kind of like riff on everything, kind of like off the cuff. So he referred to T-Bar as "that boy ain't right." If that was improv, like off the top of his head in that moment, fucking boffo work, Jerry Lawler, because that I never would have in a million years come up with that. So if he didn't have the notes for that and just came up with that, that's pretty amazing. Anyway, the match is what it is. I'm spending most of the time kind of looking at Slapjack's movements to see, is that Shane Thorne or is it The Miz? I had to look at the pictures of The Miz recently and kind of compare the hairstyles to figure out who is who. Anyway, the match ends when Lashley has got Slapjack in the full Nelson, and then T-Bar, that's Dijakovic's character, dinks Lashley from the apron, and it's the rarely utilized, used twice this year alone, the illegal man hits the legal man and the referee sees it and calls it DQ. So another DQ finish. Woo doggies. Out comes Drew McIntyre. Well, first out comes the rest of Retribution, all the goons, and then out comes Drew McIntyre and the rest of the locker room, all like 5 of them, and it's a big old brawl, and as that's happening, Drew gets back in the ring, Randy Orton comes back out, hits an RKO onto Drew, and stands tall as we fade to black. I am so glad that they wasted an in-ring debut for Retribution after all these weeks with zero build in favor of yet another schmoz ending on the night, and probably the 20th in the last like 2 or 3 weeks of Raw, just standard issue. My grade for Raw this week is a D. This was a very, very wild, in a lot of the wrong ways, episode of Raw. There were some things that I enjoyed about this week's Raw. I'm not going to lie. Like I said, Orton had a great promo after the schmoz ending of Keith Lee and Drew McIntyre once again. There was good comedy with R-Truth and Akira Tozawa on the beach. On the whole, I enjoyed Raw Underground, and I think that the Mysterio, family angle right now is just weird enough and just compelling enough. I'm like, you have my attention, but don't screw this up. But then, oh my God, just like Retribution on the whole tonight just confounded me and pissed me off. Just like the very revealing masks, the names, the booking of their in-ring debut, the logic or lack thereof of them being signed to contracts at all. They're completely confusing motives and why they're there. It makes no sense anymore. I didn't think you could make Retribution any worse than they already were, but they made it worse. Somehow they fucked it up even more. And man, so many bullshit endings tonight. So many DQ finishes, just ruining matches. Who cares about seeing Andrade and Angel Garza versus the Street Profits once again for the tag titles? Again, they really jumped the gun on poisoning Montez Ford. They should have saved that for this part of the storyline, not the middle point. But man, God, so much wrong with tonight. There were some good things, I will say, but like considering Retribution right now is like one of the biggest things on Raw at the moment, for them just to cock it up so much, it's like, oh, and the dynamic of them and the Hurt Business, like who are we supposed to cheer for? How are we supposed to cheer for the Hurt Business for what they're doing with Apollo Crews? It's madness. Well, I have to go lie down for a minute, but let me know what you thought about Raw this week in the comment section below, and stay tuned for later in the week for my Clash of Champions predictions video. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.